Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining this session of the Northern Ireland Planner Live, organised by the RTPI. My name is Emma Walker, immediate past chair of the RTPI Northern Ireland, and I will be chairing this morning's session on the integrated approach to future development through the development plan. In her opening speech on Monday, Minister Nicola Mallon described the local development plans as the vehicle for the delivery of infrastructure and our economic recovery through these uncertain times. Over the next hour, we are going to hear from three key speakers on the role of the local development plan in ensuring the integration of infrastructure in land use planning. Before we start, I want to thank our sponsors for the session, Landmark Chambers and ARUP, and remind you that if you are using social media to tweet or share the event, if you could please use the hashtag NIPlanningLive2020. Also, as our speakers go through their presentations, you will be able to ask questions through the question and answer box, which you should see on your screen, and we will go through the questions once all of the three speakers have finished. So first up this morning we have Alistair Beggs. Alistair was appointed Director of Strategic Planning in February of 2018. He has over 25 years' experience working in a wide range of planning posts. Prior to his time at the department, he spent 13 years with the Planning Appeals and Water Appeals Commission and has worked with Dundee City Council, Angus Council and Fife Council in Scotland. Alistair is going to talk us through the role of the local development plans across Northern Ireland and the preparation of local development plans in these challenging times. So I'll hand over to Alistair.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you for the opportunity to talk to you at NI Planner Live 2020. And I have a short time to talk to you about local development plans in challenging times. And it's certainly been challenging in more way than one for us. I'm not only talking about the situation of the pandemic, but if we go back to it in terms of our assembly, it's been back for 9 months now after a 3-year hiatus. And there's been a limited amount of time for our ministers to understand and get a hold of the matters within their portfolios. And our minister has been very busy promoting planning as a vehicle for change and public engagement, a green recovery, and as Emma has mentioned, she's very keen to see local development plans as part of that push towards recovery. We also have Brexit hanging over us with its own challenges and a huge degree of uncertainty there. And we're all aware of our own infrastructure issues, in particular our wastewater infrastructure, which is at or nearing capacity in many places across Northern Ireland. And we also need to think about the funding for all these things and the Northern Ireland budget generally. And I think it's important to note that the Northern Ireland budget has been developed in a difficult financial context. In real terms, I understand that the executives block grant is something like £360 million below pre-austerity levels when comparing like-for-like funding. And over that time, the pressure on our public services has only increased. And then came along COVID-19, the most significant public health emergency we've faced in a generation. And furthermore, the adverse economic impacts of the crisis are predicted to be perhaps further reaching and perhaps longer lasting than we had initially thought. And so while evidence is continuing to emerge here, it's likely that the impacts will be felt across all our sectors of the economy, retail to tourism, construction, transport, and that's never mind the impact upon our health services and our frontline workers. So for all of us, it has really been a very challenging and uniquely challenging time. And if you're looking at the department's vision of connecting people safely, supporting communities and opportunities and creating sustainable living places, there has been a difficulty there as well. As a department, we are there to provide and maintain connections for safe travel and transport for people and good. Yet now we have limits on people on buses. We've got financial pressures that are ensuing from that. And we have pressure on our delivery chains. We support opportunities for economic growth and sustainable development, yet we've had to deal with a lockdown, furlough, redundancies, and a reshaping of our cities and towns. And as a department, we're also there to ensure the creation of living places is planned properly and supported by the necessary infrastructure. Yet we've had to deal with temporary road closures to facilitate distancing. And we've had a change in people's expectations of what they want from where they live. And all these things are going to be feeding into our local development plans as they come forward. Now, our Minister has been very clear that the planning system has a key role to play in responding to the crisis and in supporting a green recovery. So as planners, we need to see how we address this new world to see where the opportunities are for reshaping the post-COVID environment. And we need to adapt, recalibrate, and provide environments that are going to work for people. And as a department, we know we can only do this with the support of local government and the wider community if we're to create healthy living places. And we do this through our policy oversight of the planning system, of the local development plans, and by looking at regionally significant planning applications. So yes, there's a lot of uncertainty about there for local development plans, but there's also a great opportunity. I mean, after all, what is our future world going to look like? How far is it going to return to what we know? In fact, should it return to what we know? And one thing to remember is that in terms of the local development plans, we are still working our way through a non-familiar system with a new independent examination process that's going to focus on the testing of the soundness of plans and assessing their preparation against a series of soundness tests. But with all this change, I think the words of Lance Corporal Jones, and those of an older generation will probably recognise these, don't panic. I think we need to think very much about where we are. If we look at it, we have the 5 core planning principles that are set out in the Strategic Planning Policy Statement. These are perhaps more critical and relevant than ever before to us. I do think that the broad strategic tools are in place to help us deal with the current situation. If you're looking at it in terms of the Strategic Planning Policy Statement, the Regional Development Strategy, these documents are setting out a spatial framework and policy direction which still remains valid. And documents like Living Places are also now as valid as ever. While our context is changing due to COVID and other issues, as planners we are still trying to achieve exactly the same things, places where people want to live, work, and play. And if we look at it, we have come a long way in terms of the LDP preparation. Positively, that the councils have been progressing their LDPs to a point where there are now 7 draft strategies published and 1 independent examination for Belfast, which has been caused by the department, and the Planning Appeals Commission are currently in the midst of organising that. So we are jumping the unfamiliar hurdles as we come to them, and we're going to keep doing that. And if we're looking at situations like COVID, which is before us, the scope is still there for development plans to be flexible in a positive manner where justified. And I think it's important to look at what local development plans are there to do. They're to have an emphasis on planning for sustainable growth. They're there to have a more strategic vision and approach than previous plans. And they're tailored to local circumstances and issues within the regional planning framework and building on the statutory link with the community plan. So in short, they're there to put in place local needs. They're to look at placemaking, and they're there to put placemaking at the heart of future development. So if our strategic policies and our plans are hitting these points, that is just what we need to move on into the recovery from COVID-19. And certainly I'm convinced that the evidence-based approach which councils are required to take will still allow us to create development plans to provide the framework for development throughout Northern Ireland for the next 15 years, COVID or no COVID-19. And as a department, our role in this, we remain committed to meaningful engagement with our council partners and providing them advice and guidance throughout the plan development. Our role as a statutory consultee in relation to planning, roads, transport policy, rivers and water policy and drainage, all that remains. And our oversight responsibilities in the planning group also remain. And in exercising these roles as a department, we're going to remain focused on emerging plans and help them to support and deliver the outcome indicators which have been indicated in the programme for government. And in our role as a statutory consultee, we've really been homing in on 3 key issues in order to reinforce their importance to achieving an integrated and a coordinated approach to higher level regional planning aims and objectives. And that focus is unlikely to change. The 3 key issues that we've been really homing in on are the LDP's growth strategies, including housing and employment land allocations, the need for cross-boundary cooperation, and infrastructure issues, which are key to underpinning sustainable development growth. And as I mentioned earlier, the LDP system here is evidence-driven. And the evidence gathering means councils will have a strong understanding of the social, economic and environmental characteristics in their own plan area. And it remains vital to good plan making that this evidence is kept up to date. And for those plans not yet submitted for independent examination, public consultation may already result in a need to review or update an evidence base. And now, given the COVID-19 pandemic, the potential effect on existing pre-pandemic evidence bases may be raised. But I would suggest that council should not be afraid of taking time to reflect upon the impacts of COVID on their evidence bases or their strategy and policy in terms of their sensitivity to the consequences of the pandemic. Now, perhaps little or no change will be needed to plans. And indeed, perhaps there may be an opportunity for the LDP to address and promote positive change. And it's a matter of course asking questions can keep a focus on a cohesive local development plan that is right for each plan area. Now ultimately, however, the level of required evidence is to be considered, i.e. is going to be one of the tests of soundness. So in general, I still don't see any need to panic there. Let's consider things calmly and rationally in relation to COVID-19. Now, as the Minister has noted in her own opening address, our goal must be places that simultaneously support well-being and a green recovery, where people are empowered to make sustainable choices about where they live and how they travel to access services. And she stressed that that's going to require a collective focus from councils, the development industry, public bodies, government departments, and the executive on the importance of good design and placemaking. And LDPs are perfectly placed still to achieve that goal. And that's because they have the ability to encourage the public to engage in the process meaningfully with schools, with the community groups, sport clubs. And it's because they can also learn from and build upon the best elements of the response to COVID. And they can address shortcomings in our built and natural and environment. And they can also accept that high quality places are essential not just to people's well-being, but to their future economic prosperity. So really, I think we can still think holistically about how all these things pull together. And it's even more important that ever that we advocate for the economic benefits of placemaking and good design. using the economic challenge of COVID to justify low-quality developments in unsustainable locations simply risks repeating previous errors in allowing development on unsustainable locations without the infrastructure to allow people to make healthy, sustainable choices in their lives. And really, if we're going to be doing this, innovation and partnership are key here. And our Minister is very supportive of a partnership approach to rebuilding our economy and recognise the importance of an effective planning system, including local development plans, in supporting this objective. So if I can come to a close to my speech, I suppose, yes, these are uncertain times, but as a wider society, we perhaps have a once-in-a-generation chance to think about places and how we want to live and work and play in those places. And as planners, the basics are there to help us do that. And a good, resilient local development plan strategy based on good evidence and catering for local areas will assist us form the local policy plans as they come along, as the future becomes clearer. And that is going to help us plan our post-COVID-19 world and the wider issues that we face with our environment, including climate change. So let's not panic. There's an opportunity here, and I think the local development plans are well placed to provide that. And I'm certainly going to be looking forward to Aidan's speech later on to see how Belfast are going forward with that. But can I thank you all for listening? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Alistair, and thank you to those who have submitted some questions. We will go through those at the end of all of the presentations, so do keep your questions coming. Next up, we have Aidan Thatcher. Aidan is the Director of Planning and Building Control at Belfast City Council. He has almost 20 years of planning experience across both the public and private sector. Much of his recent career has combined strategic management of services with organisational change, resulting in improved service delivery and increased resilience across service areas. Aidan is going to speak to us today.
Thanks, Emma. So thank you for the introduction. What I'll be talking about as well as that is integrating land use and infrastructure planning. But I wanted to start with a reminder of what planning is all about, sustainable development and the change responsibilities within the new system in Northern Ireland, which isn't so new anymore since regional changes took place 5 years ago. So key to the planning role is the local development plan. It's only recently been returned to elected councils' responsibilities, and central government are still to focus on delivery in relation to their strategic policy and delivery roles to support that process. A couple of examples are that there is no infrastructure plan as yet and no up-to-date transport plan. The local development plan will seek to provide a 15-year policy framework to support economic and social needs of the city in line with the regional and strategic policies Alistair set out earlier, whilst also providing for the delivery of sustainable development. It would also facilitate growth by coordinating public and private investment to encourage development where it will be of most benefit to the community. It will allocate sufficient land to meet the needs of the city and provides an opportunity for all stakeholders, including the public, to have a say about the development within their local area and how that should take place. Clearly, it's important that any necessary infrastructure is provided to meet the growing demands of any new development. This includes infrastructure as we traditionally know it, such as water supply, drainage, sewage, water, roads, public transport. It also means infrastructure such as local community services, accessible parks and open spaces, and green infrastructure that works with nature to provide additional benefits such as flood alleviation and improved air quality, the often forgotten about aspects that connect us with our day-to-day needs in the built environment. Our growth ambitions were established early and set out as part of the Belfast Agenda, which is Belfast City Council's community plan. They've been reflected in our draft plan strategy. The shared ambition is to facilitate this through the local development plan, including at local policy stage, where land will be identified for particular uses, including housing and employment. The growth figures recognise Belfast's role as the regional capital and the economic driver for Northern Ireland, consistent with the regional development strategy and the fundamental principles of proper planning and sustainable development that seek to increase densities within existing urban areas, particularly using brownfield land, thereby reducing the overall need to travel and promoting a range of more sustainable transport methods. They also recognise the unfortunate and unintended spatial consequences of previous strategic plans and our recent history. That's in terms of urban sprawl, dispersed population, and increasing dependence on less sustainable transport methods, which are all contributing to the current infrastructure challenges across the region, including the consequences of the changed institutional infrastructure. The Local Development Plan strategy is in many ways a simple response to our urban challenges that mask the complexity of the work ahead of us to secure the delivery. Our LDP, to be successful, needs our partners and stakeholders to adopt new approaches to meeting the challenges that we all face. Through the work on the LDP, other strands of activity have been initiated and developed. The strategy seeks to support and build on the well-established fundamental principles of sustainable development, including integration of transport and land use planning, whilst also focusing new development within the existing urban areas. Indeed, it seeks to achieve significant development densities at the most sustainable locations and reuse vacant, derelict or underused land in a more beneficial and sustainable manner. The themes and approach to the plan appropriately reflect those in the Belfast Agenda, Regional Development Strategy and the Strategic Planning Policy Statement. Through the plan, we wish to be shaping a livable place, promoting green and active place, and creating a vibrant economy. All of that will ensure that our work and decisions contribute to building a smart, connected and resilient place. This is the first part of the Local Development Plan and is the culmination of many interlinked processes that have seen us working with partners and stakeholders in creating a vision and policies to shape the future of the city in regards to the economy, population, housing, environment, green and active, transport and infrastructure, as well as urban design. As with any new process and the changing world in which we live, the process has continued to evolve as the strategy has become more complex, such as the requirement to now include operational policies and detail in the first stage of the process. The Council have adapted to the external environment through practical initiatives to drive through the City Deal and appoint a Resilience Commissioner to adapt to these challenges. Resilience is about the infrastructure in its broadest sense and the ability of the city to learn and adapt to the changes and challenges that we're going to face over the planned period and beyond. The work of the Resilience Commissioner and the broad focus of resilience goes beyond environmental and well into economic and social dimensions, a range of which are displayed on the current slide. In addition, it can be seen how well that the city has responded to the COVID-19 pandemic, just reflecting how well we are becoming resilient as a city. The Local Development Plan is a key element in the drive to address the infrastructure challenges we face and has provided a stimulus for the Council to work proactively with stakeholders to address challenges in new ways and to avoid some of the mistakes of the past, which Alistair alluded to earlier. It's clear from the outset that with the new process and the growth ambitions set out, we would have to go beyond strategy development to show what can be achieved and start to work to address the issues in a joined-up manner. Work has commenced on the local policies plan, but we are limited currently how far this can be taken until the independent examination on the draft plan strategy is progressed. Similarly, work on supplementary planning guidance in relation to new areas of proposed development, such as social and affordable housing, retail, design, master plans, which needs to be well progressed, along with viability considerations as the plan seeks to ensure development addresses infrastructure and other requirements in a more coordinated manner. Our first Green and Blue infrastructure plan was adopted earlier this year as an offshoot to the work of the local development plan in connection with our open spaces strategy. The bolder vision drives a broader spatial approach to transport and infrastructure for the core of the city, and the Belfast City Centre regeneration and investment strategy sets the context for the support to repopulate and regenerate the city centre, all key aspects to achieve the local development ambitions. The Green and Blue Infrastructure Plan provides a framework for working with nature to provide and improve the multi-benefits of our green and blue areas of the city and environmental building on our experience in the delivery of the Connswater Greenway, which was an early example of integrating infrastructure upgrading with resilience objectives and the delivery of open space for the residents of our city. The plan looks at our green and blue assets strategically and in a different way with our partners through parallel programmes such as the Living with Water initiative that will seek to ensure the city has the infrastructure to both support proposed development growth and future resilience. The document will become future supplementary planning guidance and already drives to work to better connect the city and provide a more effective network for residents, biodiversity, drainage and other systems through a multifunctional approach. Policies in the local development plan strongly support local public transport and transport-related development. Through the work of the local development plan, we seek to ensure other factors and practical changes are addressed to help policy and development realise the ambition for a more compact and sustainable city. Work includes transport plans such as the bolder vision, a parking strategy including review of off-street parking provision, expansion of the successful city bike scheme, and strategic connections through the city deal, such as the Glider Phase 2. We're currently working on mobility and connectivity with the new cycling champion and the Fund for the Sustainable Transport initiatives, which were introduced by the Minister of Infrastructure earlier this year. Whilst not a statutory responsibility of the Council, this flooding, water and drainage is a key issue for the city. And as I said earlier, there is no regional infrastructure plan for Northern Ireland currently. We have good evidence and a track record of partnership working, the delivery of the Connswater Greenway, a proposed new pumping station in East Belfast on council land, and the ongoing use of council assets for a variety of soft and hard infrastructure initiatives, all supported in the local development plan strategy to ensure the key link between planning and delivery of infrastructure. The LDP has been challenged on its growth strategy. We have received adverse comments from statutory partners which we consider to be out of context. This has been somewhat surprising as through the local development plan process and the Living with Water programme, we've been working together with our partners and has allowed greater access to accurate information and sharing. We're also supporting other initiatives such as the Tidal Flood Alleviation Scheme and the pilot for SUDs and other forms of attenuation which are included in local development plan policy and proposed supplementary planning guidance. The supplementary planning guidance approach we consider gives greater flexibility and responsiveness in the provisions of policy for topics where they are evolving or changing contexts, alongside allowing for new approaches and innovation as time progresses. Much of the preceding technical infrastructure is important for us to address the key aspects of neighbourhoods, placemaking and wellbeing. Typical infrastructure is only one aspect of what is required. The remainder include policy to address physical divisions, supplementary planning guidance on placemaking and urban design, a developer contributions framework to provide infrastructure for communities, and connectivity with an emphasis on local accessibility. We've also included strategic policies in the local development plan, and these include relating to improving health and wellbeing, community cohesion and good relations, and positive placemaking. That's alongside a whole raft of operational policies such as housing provision and mix, which includes social and affordable, community infrastructure, and meanwhile uses. We've also had a lot to learn from the current pandemic. Alistair touched quite a lot on this, so I won't in as much detail, but it has drastically altered how we use our built environment. How long the new trends will last, we just don't know at this stage. In the short term, we've been working collaboratively across the city to make better use of places, to respond to residents' needs, and as well as encouraging the economic recovery. Key to that has been keeping the progress going on major applications, and we've seen key progress on the former Royal Exchange, which recently went through committee, and Scirocco, which was recently issued, as well as keeping the smaller schemes moving. We've also continued to be resourceful, changing the way we think and ultimately retaining a longer term view to ensure behaviours and intentions are supported by the strategic policy position. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Aidan. So we now have our final speaker, but just another reminder to just keep sending those questions through. There's quite a few that I'll put to the panel at the end, but do keep them coming. So our final speaker is John O'Hara. John is the head of land use policy at Dublin City Council. John works on the delivery of strategic planning for the city through the City Development Plan, local area plans and strategic development zones. John has over 30 years of planning and local government experience in both the United Kingdom and Ireland, and is also currently a member of the Dublin Housing Task Force, which was established by the government to improve housing supply in the region. So John is going to give us a view from Dublin on the integrated land use planning and infrastructure.
Good morning, everybody. Can you hear me? Yeah. Good morning. First of all, I'd like to thank you for the opportunity to speak at your RTPI conference, and to thank Dr. Roisin Wilmot for the invitation. This is a satellite image of Dublin City. It's a city of 1.35 million at the moment. The projection is to grow to 1.75 million people within the next 20 years. So it's important that we address this growth by, at the same time, reduce our carbon footprint, reduce urban sprawl, and we must provide the range of infrastructure to cater for this extra population. So those familiar with Dublin, you can see the airport there to the north, you can see the port there, which contains the Ringsend water treatment plant, which is at capacity, and you can see to the south the Dublin Wicklow Mountains, which provides a large amount of our water supply, again at capacity. So we're looking to the Shannon for the next supply, even though we have 30 to 35% wastage from rusty pipes. These are some of the issues that are facing our infrastructure. A lot of mention made about COVID, yes, and I think it is important that whilst we are cognizant of COVID, that, as said by earlier speakers, we don't panic. One of the things that we're actively considering, as well as the short-term measures at the moment, is whether the improved public transport combined with home working, if that becomes a long-term feature, is that actually contributing to urban sprawl and dispersal? And as was said earlier, is that a or a bad thing if it saves energy and saves time travelling. So these are the things that we're thinking about at the moment. If I just show you there, if you superimpose, one of the first challenges we have as a city is that the city is divided into 4 municipalities, local authorities. I'm the planning manager for Dublin City Council, just about 560,000 people. There are 3 other local authorities in the region, each with its own development plan and its own elected councillors. So one of the issues we have is how to coordinate infrastructure provision between our 4 local authorities. The way we address this is at a national level. In the last 4 or 5 years, we have a fairly strong hierarchy of plans, starting with the National Planning Framework 2 or 3 years ago, coupled with the National Development Plan that sets out the infrastructure and the funding over the next 15-20 years to provide for the National Planning Framework. And I would stress that this is one thing that we we pushed for. At the City Council level, because for too long we've had good plans with no funding identified to support the infrastructure. Then we have just approved a year ago the new regional strategy for the Eastern region, which accords with the national plan, and the regional strategy, an essential part of that, is the Metropolitan Area Spatial Plan. The Dublin City Development Plan sits at the bottom of that hierarchy, and the development plan at the moment is will end in the next 2 years, and we're starting a review of that to commence the next development plan at the moment. So if we just look at our infrastructure, and I think we're all aware of this, there's this tendency in the past to think of hard infrastructure, roads, transport, pipelines, electricity, and all of that sort of stuff on the one side. Then we have soft infrastructure, which we're all aware of now, and it's very important: education, social infrastructure, good governance, and then we're entering into another area of virtual, the Internet of Things, smart cities, even webinars like this. Is this part of the new infrastructure of urban living? I don't know. And all of that surely must come under the purple heading at the top there, integrated planning and placemaking. If we start divvying things up and we behave in silos, we will never achieve the integrated planning and placemaking which we're all aiming for. Another layer, of course, are the infrastructure providers. Under hard infrastructure, we have Irish Rail, the National Transport Authority, Transport Infrastructure Ireland, which control roads, and the Lewis tram system. Yeah, and Isca Water, Irish Water there at the bottom, which was established 3 or 4 years ago, separate from local authorities in order to have a national overview of the provision of water and sewage for the city. And then increasingly, as I said earlier, there's the soft infrastructure, schools, education, community, and the virtual infrastructure, which we have to integrate as shown in this Venn diagram. So under the regional strategy is the Metropolitan Area Spatial Plan. This is the plan approved just last year to integrate the 4 local authorities thinking under the national plan that I just referred to earlier. You can see right, the Dublin City is the yellow area, and it's a coordinated plan between the local authorities and the national infrastructure providers, the Transport Authority, Department of Education, Irish Water, in order to achieve sustainable higher density development and quality development for the city going forward, bearing in mind that 50% of the future growth must be in brownfield sites within built-up areas. Our evidence is probably shared with the other local authorities. Studies show that you need to be achieving 60 units per hectare minimum to have viable buses and tram systems and even local shops. One of the things that we're working on at the moment there. I'll just show you the green one from Swords through the airport down to the city centre is the new metro line. We've had long discussions with TII about which part should be underground, how the metro can be used in this location of stations to improve placemaking along the routes, for instance in Ballymun, a long-term regeneration area, and how to bring density, quality density back into the city. I have to say this is the third time that the metro line has got to design stage, because here in the south probably we are very susceptible to economic swings, and hopefully this time under the National Development Plan there will be committed funding for the realisation of this project. Again, just to show you the City Development Plan, we have a core strategy established, and that core strategy complies with the MASP, and it imbues all our thinking. It imbues everything from our local plans, for STZs, for our development management of planning applications. So you can see, not labour it, but it's got the key principles that you have in Belfast there. And I think for the first time we're showing, you can see the green infrastructure there, which are along the canals and the Liffey and the coast. That's the corollary of the higher density, quality density, is green infrastructure, and that's to make the city more attractive and for people to recreate it, and also for biodiversity and all those other good things. The other aspect of the core strategy of the city is the mixed-use approach, which we've been following for the past 2 development plans. The new thinking is of the 10-15 minute city, whereby people work and live and have their cultural activities and recreation as close as possible to each other, and I think that chimes with the thinking with COVID, and maybe a long-term way of thinking, and should be a long-term way of thinking, irrespective of COVID. It's essentially good placemaking. I referred earlier to our strategic development zones. We have 3 strategic development zones in the city, 2 down the Docklands and 1 at Grange Gormand. I want to bring these to your attention because these have been very successful for us for bringing forward major brownfield areas in the city. The key point about an STZ is that they are based on a government designation, i.e. they're of strategic importance to the state. And as a result of that, there has to be buy-in from the big infrastructure providers, the state infrastructure providers. So that makes it a wee bit easier for us as a local authority to ensure that there's buy-in from those the big providers. The other aspect of STZs is that the master plan is fixed for each of them. That brings certainty for the developers, for the community, and for the infrastructure providers, i.e. they know that by committing funding to new streets, new sewage systems, new water supply, and new bridges, there won't be white elephants in the future. So the success, say, in the Dublin Docklands is that we have a scheme now for over 6,000 new homes, nearly half of which have been provided so far, 30,000 new jobs, and the other aspect, which we are at early stages yet, is promoting district heating and providing district heating enabling infrastructure in the roads and streets of the area. Again, following the mixed-use philosophy, 50-50 split between housing and commercial is a requirement in our Docklands STZ, and as a result, if you walk around there, you'll see there's been a bit of a lag because commercial happened first. But we held the areas for residential, and that's now happening. The same principles apply for local plans. We've 8 or 10 local plans under the City Development Plan, and I'll not labour this point. Some of them here, such as Cherry Orchard, are in deprived areas. Again, the same things come into play. We have to provide green infrastructure, placemaking, and to achieve that, we have had to have implementation teams, interdepartmental implementation teams that are on the case all the time. The same applies to the SDZs. If you take your foot off the pedal with any of our SDs or local area plans, I know it's resource intensive and all, but if you do that, you lose momentum, and other people's priorities, including those of the infrastructure providers, may take over. The next area that we're moving into in the city is looking at all the lands inside the M50 that are the old, tired industrial estates. We have 600 hectares of those such lands, a couple of them here. There's potential there for 20 to 30,000 new homes over the next 10 years. We're looking now at how to provide integrated infrastructure to bring these places, to make new places, new neighbourhoods. We have to look at a vehicle, something between local area plans and the SDZs to make these happen, and to provide affordable housing. Affordable housing is a big issue for the city here, and what we're conscious of here in the city is that if you rezone into old tired industrial lands to residential, the increase in value twofold overnight, 100%. So that we have to capture some of that value increase and use that for the infrastructure provision up front if we can. We have a new land development agency here which we're going to work closely with, or we are working closely with, to help implement that sort of thinking. And of course, as my previous speakers have referred to, the public realm is a key part of our infrastructure to make the city more attractive in the future. The example here I'm giving you is College Green in front of Trinity College. For a new plaza there. It was refused by our National Appeals Board in Borpanola last year because of opposition from the car lobby and the bus lobby. But again, as was mentioned earlier, we have put in temporary wider footpaths, temporary cycleways, and those surprisingly people have found them not as fearsome as they first thought. There's a broad acceptance, so we're going to go ahead with this proposal again in the near future. Active land management is a big part of our approach in the city now. As I said earlier, it's interdepartmental. It includes things like looking at our vacant land, looking at our social infrastructure provision, and looking at social infrastructure deficits and where they may be provided. The development plan, again, the same issues arise as mentioned earlier, so I'll not go into them in any detail. Big matter for us to look at now is climate change, resilience, as I said earlier, district heating and the smart city. One of the things there, the e-charging, in our conservation areas, we have to look at how we can promote e-charging without destroying the front walls and gardens and of our conservation areas. Small thing, but it's a thing we have to think about. And maybe some conclusions now for us to think about integrating land use plan infrastructure. The first thing that occurs to me is that we must ensure that the national planning framework and the regional strategy is supported by a capital programme, i.e. funding. With interdepartmental buy-in. Here that means to buy-in from the ministers of each department. Secondly, we must ensure that capital programme is at municipal level, and that is aligned with the development plan and local plans. As I said, no point in making plans if we haven't argued for or continue to argue for the funding to provide for the necessary coordinated infrastructure. Thirdly, continued engagement between our local authorities and the infrastructure providers. I think Belfast have just mentioned that there. We have to keep persuading, talking to our infrastructure providers about the importance of coordinated infrastructure. As I said earlier, we have to proactive implementation teams. And the agency for the SDZs must have teeth and influence up and down the chain. We must engender political buy-in at the local level. If we have our councillors inside, that's a great asset. There's not much we can do if we don't have buy-in from our councillors. importance of branding and profile. The Docklands, we've had a branding system which has been very good. And then the last point, be alert to small wins. Things like we used, I know it's a sad event, but we used the pandemic to put in cycle lanes temporarily in the city, but I think they will become a permanent feature, and they are in accordance with the city development plan overall. So just thank you very much. Yeah, cheerio. Bye.
Okay, thank you very much, John. So we're now just going to have a short question and answer session. We've got about 10 minutes or so to field a couple of questions. So if I can just ask all of our speakers to join again. Thank you very much. So my first question I'm going to direct towards Alistair. Alistair, you spoke at the beginning about the potential impact of the pandemic on the local development plan process, and we've had a question come in which is really how responsive can the local development plan be, given that there is a process to go through and we're looking at timeframes of potentially 2025 before some local plans are fully in place. And I suppose is that a quick enough response, or is there anything that can be done to move things along quicker?
No, it's an interesting question. I think in terms of the local development plan process, we would have all liked it to have moved along faster than it has, but this is, in terms of planning, that process has been quite a big bang to the system. It's new, it's unfamiliar, and there are processes to be gone through, and those have to be gone through carefully. I think if they're not, we always risk the chance of a plan being sent back to square one, and that's not helpful to anyone. So while I appreciate there would probably be a lot of frustration out there about the speed at which plans are moving forward, I think councils are doing a very good job of bringing them forward in the context that we've had. In terms of COVID-19 response, there's going to be short-term impacts, there's going to be medium-term impacts, there's going to be long-term impacts. I think what I was saying is, I think we have a strategic policy basis to help us deal with immediate impacts if it's applied right. All the tools that are there for us to use. And as the plans start to come in and out of independent examination, they will feed into that longer term recovery, because I think what we're seeing now is very definitely that this is going to be a long drawn out process for a number of years.
Okay, thank you. And that leads us on to another question that we've received for Aidan, possibly. We've heard that Belfast are very well progressed with their plan. Had it not been for COVID-19, we might have been sitting in independent examinations. But I suppose, taken back to what Alistair has said in his presentation, one of the questions that we've had is, what impact do you think the COVID-19 would have on your evidence base and potential soundness, or has the council looked at that and considered that at all?
Yeah, so I think when it comes to the progression of the local development plan, we had clearly submitted all of our evidence base to, firstly, Department of Infrastructure back in August last year, well in advance of the pandemic. And that also went over to the Planning Appeals Commission in December last year. So again, in advance of it's very difficult in terms of the legislative process to update that evidence outside of when it's been submitted, unless the Commissioner directs us to as part of the independent examination. So clearly, as an organisation, we are looking at the impact of COVID-19 on all of our services, including the planning system, which we are obviously responsible for now. But at this stage, it's probably premature to start looking at changing that evidence base unless we get a direction from the Planning Appeals Commissioner.
Okay, thank you. And I suppose a question that I would put, sort of following on from that, to John then, is you have spoken there about recent development plan and local plans that have been prepared in the Dublin city area and have been adopted. I suppose, do you feel that they are pandemic proof in terms of, is there anything that you would want to change or review in those plans in response to the pandemic, or do you think that the same sort of measures apply, given that it's all about the promotion of sustainable development?
Yeah, I was very much persuaded by Alistair's comment earlier that we shouldn't panic here, and our local plans and the city development plan, we have to be cognizant of the COVID implications. For the city here, it's worrying at the moment. The city is extremely quiet. Our theatres have closed virtually. Retail is really down. Office development, as you know, is curtailed. And of course, we had a major boom there in hotel provision, all providing employment as a result of tourism. So, there are knee-jerk reactions out there. Oh, should we change all hotels now to residential schemes and all offices to residential schemes? I'm not one for being over hasty there, but I think, as I said, there are small things we should be doing that are part of a long-term thinking. That is, and our LEPs and development plan will be amended to do that, i.e. better public transport, better bus connects systems, wider footpaths, more sitting out areas, because pubs, restaurants, and that. We have to get people into the city to go to theatres and that, and to etc. And better quality public realm. These are things we should be doing, and we can tweak our local plans to achieve those. Yeah, that's okay. Thanks.
Thank you. Aidan, I don't know whether you want to come in there, Aidan, just in terms of we've obviously heard similar press articles and things about the footfall in Belfast city centre and office space obviously not being fully occupied at the moment with the people working from home. Do you feel that the Belfast plan strategy is flexible enough there to, I suppose, encourage other uses within town centres and really to encourage?
Yeah, I mean, I'd echo what John said there, really. We obviously have a plan that's evolving for the city. It's a long-term plan, and all long-term development plans since the planning system began set out a vision for the city that they plan for. There are always short shocks to economic progress through recessions, or albeit at the moment we're in a pandemic which is creating its own shock. I think through long-term planning we need to remind ourselves that actually we're looking at the overall aims for the city over a long-term period, not a short-term period. So there are smaller things that can be done and brought forward, and things like pedestrianisation, new cycle lanes, all the things that we've got the vision for the city at the moment. They're actually coming forward, albeit on an ad hoc basis, but hopefully will then be planned and manage to come forward quicker than maybe they would have ordinarily happened. So I think if you put a spin on things, that's good for the city. In terms of whether our policies and plans are flexible enough, yes, they are. The city centre is going to change. Even before COVID, it was changing. So away from traditional retail, the loss of the department stores, all those sorts of things we've been planning for and managing through our evidence base, which tells us what the trends may be in the future, but also in creating policies that are adaptable and flexible, and through the use of supplementary planning guidance, which is easier to change through the lifetime of a development plan. And that's why we're taking that more flexible.
Okay, thank you very much. I have one final question which I just want to put to all of the panel that's come in, and that question sort of focuses on, the Minister did say that the local development plan and the planning system is the delivery vehicle for sustainable development. I suppose a question that's been asked is, does the panel feel that the
Yeah.
I'll go first on that one if you like. I think it is. The planning system is moving well through the response, and the Minister, as Alistair alluded to earlier, has come in 9 months ago and getting to grips with things. I think she said it herself in her opening speech. It's been a tall order to get her head around the whole scope of her area. The planning system, I would say, is flexible. It is moving at probably a slower pace than all of us would like it to in relation to new development plans. However, the development management system, I think, which obviously pushes through individual schemes, is responsive, it's getting quicker, and it is allowing for new ways of.
Yeah, I think what Aidan's been talking about it is quite right. Certain bits have been moving slower than others, but the policy basis is there for us to be making decisions and going forward. If we're implementing our policies correctly, then we should be creating a sustainable environment for the future, and one that's capable of dealing with the green recovery. And that's the challenge for us planners, to keep everybody focused on that as we go through whether it be our elected members, our ministers and so on, but to keep reinforcing what is the core aim of policy in planning in terms of recovery and sustainability.
I think hello, can you hear me? Yeah, I think we shouldn't be too negative or despondent here. We should be confident that planning can respond to this crisis. I'm looking at, say, Dublin here, the urban villages around the Rathmines and Rathgars. They're having a mini revival because people are staying local, and which is part of that 10-minute city thinking we're having, So there are good aspects happening. I would reiterate again, though, part of our issue is that rates has fallen dramatically in cities, down 20% in the last 3 months. So, but we need the funding. We need to know that we got to get funding to help the city cope with this. With this pandemic, after all, the cities are going to be here. Urban areas are the future, despite where we are at the moment. There have been, I don't want to sound dramatic, but there have been plagues before. But cities are where people congregate and where things happen, and that will continue. It's up to us as planners to ensure that there's a framework. A well-funded framework and an imaginative framework to make sure that cities are living places again, and that the living might be slightly different from just retail. It might be more going out, it might be more events and that sort of thing, but recreation. But we've got to keep the faith in city living.
Okay, thank you very much. So we're over time. We were due to finish at 11:30, so I'll just wrap up by saying a massive thank you to all of our speakers. Really appreciate you giving up your time this morning to join us. And also a thank you again to our sponsors, Landmark Chambers and ARIPS. And finally, a thank you to all of the delegates who have joined this webinar. It's great to see so many members and non-members joining us today. And if you do know of anyone who has missed the session, it can be viewed on the RTPI YouTube channel if you want to go and have a look again if you've missed anything. So